All right, let's take a look at this little structural model we were exploring in our last video. We took a look at more visibility nuances, some of the things that we might change here in Canada or North America based on how we set up datums or levels. But where we left off, we were starting to look at this foundation plan here. For the time being, I'm just going to shut this little view filter off because it's actually throwing me off, and we don't want to focus on pink walls. What we want to focus on is this structure and the foundations. So let me just close a couple views down. We'll take a look at this in 3D and explore where we're going with this. So I have some walls, and these walls are going to need some footings. There's an elevator pit back here. We'll put some footings on those. That's pretty straightforward. Not going to go too far into that. But if I want footings on walls, it's so easy. You just go to the structure tab, you click on wall, and then you select all the footings, or all the walls that you need footings for. You just go around. Basically it is a sweep, right? So when you modify the depth of the wall, let's say we grab these 4 walls and we give them a base offset of -2 feet, then that means that those footings are going to move with the wall. It's a beautiful thing. Looks like we're missing a bit of a slab there. Okay. So adding footings, not such a big deal. If we look at this piece of floor here, let's just isolate this down. If we can look at it a little closer, you can see this one has a thickening on it, and it's just a haunch. So this actually is a sweep, and it's being generated from this guy right here, slab. It's a slab edge. So what's interesting about this is it's under the tab that you would get a structural foundation or a raft slab, floating slab, whatever. But this is actually a subcategory of floors, and floors and structural foundation slabs actually behave differently. They're different subcategories, or sorry, they're different categories. So the slab edge is actually a subcategory of floors. But no matter, you still apply it to the edge of a floor. Maybe that might be, you know what, let's take a little aside. Let's go to this slab here. We'll first, sorry, we'll do a wee little tangent. Let's bring this out and let's draw ourselves a foundation slab. Set our reference plane to just be ground floor, and let's draw in a structural foundation slab. I want to see what that difference is. So there's my structural foundation, which is a slab. It's sketch based, similar to the floor. This one is actually a floor. Okay, so you can see here's a floor. It's got modify sub elements shape editing panel with it. When I select this one, all I get the options for is reinforcement. So there's some differences, but the one that I'm testing for right now is, can I do a slab edge on a structural foundation as well as the floor? If I grab this and click CS for create similar, it does appear to be letting me. Okay, so that's a good one to confirm. And again, that's just as easy as placing these, as a footing on the bottom of the walls. Okay, but the other one that maybe we don't use quite as often is for deep foundations using piles. So what I want to explain is something that I have seen recommended, and it is using structural framing as a grade beam. So let's explore that, shall we? Let's go to our foundation plan, see if we've got a concrete beam in here. Here's a concrete beam. Let's try it with this one. So this, let's say that this is a grade beam, and I want its level to be top of footing. If it's the top of the footing, then I want my Z value to be from, well, yeah, let's say from the top, and we'll leave it as a 0, so that way I don't have to do any Z offsets based on the height of this. Structural usage, I'll place this, I'll say it's primary, and I'm just going to draw that from here over, we trace this down, and that's probably where we should leave it, because I've got that haunch slab on the other side. Okay, so in 3D, we can see I've got these are structural framing. Okay. Now, if that is to be a grade beam, actually maybe that makes sense. We should duplicate this to be something a little bit different. So that's 33 by 18. Let's call this 18 by 34, 6, yeah, let's go with that. Now I've got to change this to be 18 inches wide, 36 inches tall. Those all get a little bit deeper, and we'll pretend that's a grade beam for the time being. So if that's a grade beam and a deep foundation, then I want to get into putting the piles underneath this at the grid points. So let's see how that would work. Okay. So I'm going to want to put a pile with the cap at each one of these grid intersections. That's actually pretty easy. If we have those foundation families in here, let's take a quick look. In my project browser, I'm going to structural foundations, and I do have some piles in here. Okay, so we could right click and say, create an instance, which will invoke our structural foundations tool up here, or we can go to the structure tab and use this option here, structural foundation isolated. So this, if I click on that, it's giving me these two options, at grids, at columns. So I'm going to use the at grids because I don't actually have any piers sitting above that grade beam. So let's say at grids, and if you take a look here, you're selecting a number of grids, and then as soon as you intersect them, you'll start to see these show up. Okay, so that one, that's basically all I'm going to do here. Well, let's do this one as well. So if I click on finish, note you're seeing these lines here. If we change this to be a little bit different scale, we see the hidden line subcategory take effect. And depending on what's going on with this, based on this, we're seeing that hidden line happening here. So what that's suggesting to me is that my grade beam is actually underneath this pile cap. When I select the pile cap, it should actually be underneath the grade beam. So if we made those 36 inches, if I select all instance of this guy, I should actually be pushing those minus 36 inches. And again, now I'm seeing my hidden line kind of take effect a little bit better. Okay, like I push that down, I'm no longer seeing the hidden line of the actual pile itself, I'm just seeing the cap. Okay, and then those are actually supporting that grade beam there. Okay, so if that's the case, then maybe this should just be supporting this part of the foundation, meaning these aren't in the right spot. Right, so again, if we hit SA for select all instances, and let's take a look. How might I modify where these sit? Because I didn't do it as a foundation, I did it as structural framing. So that means I have to modify the work plane. And if I hit edit work plane and choose top of foundation instead, that brings the grade beam up. Doesn't look like I'm centered here on my, but that's no matter. Now all of these need to go to the underside of this, so that should be top of foundation minus 3 feet, and down will sit at the underside. Okay. So is that the only way to do that as structural framing? I don't know. Something to consider when we went to foundation plans is we're looking down at these. And we changed structural framing, I believe, to show as a thick, fat line. So if that's the case in this structural foundation plan, I've got to make sure that if I'm using structural framing, whether it's concrete or not, that it's still showing by view which is set to fine detail, and I'll see the entire extent of that concrete, because typically when we're creating a concrete family for structural framing, there isn't a stick symbol in here that's saved for steel. Okay, if we change that, you can see it's showing as coarse. There's no difference because this is a mass. Okay, we'll just bring this back. So that's the pile itself. Let's see if we needed to change the size of these. Maybe make these a little bit smaller. That's a 4 pile combo. There's a 6 pile. Some of these are rectangular, so if that was the case, then maybe we are trying to go down the length of our grade beam. Right, so maybe these are supposed to be, right, the square ones. Now, something else to consider. That's interesting. Why am I seeing that one but not the other one? That one's still showing as top of footing. So let me say edit, change that to top of foundation. That should push that up out of view. I don't want that at 1.5 inches, obviously. Change that to 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch. Looks a little bit better. Sometimes people want to see these as dashed lines, but again, if we're following principles and I'm seeing the top of that footing, then I should only see it as a dashed line if there is a slab in here, right? So if we, oh, I don't want a foot offset in there. If I'm going to pick walls for this, I'll say just extend into wall core, and that should give me what I need. We'll make that span direction go from here. Now it says, do you want this to cut overlapping geometry? I'm going to the face of that concrete, so I don't really care in that situation. But if I go and take a look at this now, that slab should be resting on top of these footings. And when we look at that, we've got this auto join behavior, and that's not really what I want to happen. So that's something else that happens when you have the same material. Sometimes you see this auto join thing happening. So in this case, I don't want that join. I'm going to say unjoin, and then simply click on the slab, and that should bring those joints that would appear relative to my pores. And that's a pretty thick slab, that location. So let's just bring that down. That's what we're after. So interesting, this one has the hatch, these don't. I guess they probably don't have the same material. Anyway, that's not really what we're talking about for now. So yeah, let's see, we've got a bit of a foundation here, but if we go back, the one thing that I wanted to actually talk about too was what you might see with these families. If you look at this, you're thinking, well, maybe there should be a constraint for the top and bottom of the pile itself. There's not really a whole lot going on with the instance parameters, but if I go to edit type, you'll notice that you can change the length. So if we hit apply on that, that should make, oh, actually, let's cancel that, undo that. Wrong parameter. Okay, you've got some options here. So foundation thickness, that's your pile cap. Your width and your length on the rectangular, this is a formula. Okay, the cutoff and clearance, I'm not sure. There should be a height option for these, so we can't really tell what's going on with this. Let me go into the family and let's take a look. So I got a length, I got a width, and when we go to this, we see no formulas, so the width and length aren't driven by one another, so that's interesting. You might see that. If we go to an elevation, there's actually nothing driving this, but oh, this is interesting. I have a nested family in here, And you know, another reason why you should explore the families that you're using, because I was trying to figure out what is the height driven by, and I'm not seeing that here. Minimum embed, diameter, depth, that's probably it there, right? Let's see, 20 feet, that's 20 feet. So that's what's driving it. And now if I was to use this and I can't drive that parameter because I can't associate it, then I would probably take this nested family out. That doesn't really seem to make sense to me. But anyway, it's not really so much about the family, it's about placing these quickly and getting them to do what you want, but ultimately you may have to modify the family. And the difference between using structural foundation versus structural framing for a foundation in this situation. One of the things that's nice about this too is when you're placing grade beams in this manner, you can use the pick lines option here. And if we said we want that to be the face, you can see that auto join behavior taking effect because the top Z justification is actually the top of that slab. Okay. Where you may get into issues is if we needed to slope the slab. Anyway, that's good enough for foundations. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye now.